So my name is Rachel, and thank you so much for coming to this session. I'm going to actually start with a little personal story that kind of will set the tone of what we're trying to do here. So is anyone, Adam, want to join us? Adam, would you like to join us? Can't hear us. It will be nice. So about 22 years ago, I was actually at the delivering room in Bellinson Hospital in Israel, and for my first child. And outside of the delivery room were my parents, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my brother, my uncle and aunt. Before this child even came to life, even one in this world, there were already so many people that unconditionally were waiting for her and were ready to share their wisdom and share the burden and help me and my husband raise the family. The second day in the hospital, I had my grandparents show up. I had my friends from the high school, from the IDF, from college. They all came. Everybody had something to share, something to say. Then I went for 2 weeks to my parents' house, and they helped me to bath the baby and take care of the baby. And I wasn't worried at all, because there was all of this community to help me and guide me and point me out and help me share some of the history, memories, tradition. And 8 months after, we packed our stuff and we moved to Madison, Wisconsin. My husband went to grad school. And as you can imagine, I didn't have my 54 first cousins. I didn't have my family around. I didn't have the Hebrew language. I didn't have the Jewish calendar. I didn't have any, the only person I could put on my emergency list was my husband. And I remember sitting and singing to my daughter one night, one of these songs that my mother used to sing to me, and I was crying like you. I was in tears. I'm like, what am I doing? I don't know how to raise kids in America. I don't know how to raise children on my own. And it was that moment 22 years ago that actually in some way put me on this journey to think through what does it mean to raise kids, what does it mean to raise a family, what does it take, and also the responsibility that everything that I'll do, every experience that I'll create, is going to impact these children. The way I talk, the way I walk, the books that I'm going to choose to bring to my house, the food that I cook, the friends that we make. It was a big, it's a big, big responsibility. I don't know if every parent thinks this way or just me that I'm a bit overwhelmed with these things, but I was, but for me it definitely was a moment, and until now my kids are 22 and 20, and I'm still not sure that I'm doing the right thing. I'm still trying to figure out what can I do when they're in this young adult, in this intersection in their life. So this is when I took on myself, and this is what happened to many Israeli American or many immigrants when they come to the United States. But it's not only happening to Israelis, it's also happening to American Jews. And I want to explain why. When we're looking at this young generation, many of them are living far away from their parents. They don't have the community that they grew up in. Many of them are married out of the faith. So each one came with different stories. And they're thinking, what are the stories that we are going to tell our kids? Do I feel comfortable to share my story, or my partner is going to share their stories? What are we going to do? They're also bombarded with stuff on the internet. This is generation, so many options. What should I choose for my kids? Should I choose more academic because I want them to get into Harvard? And you see sometimes kids in kindergarten, they need to be prepared for kindergarten and prepared for second grade and to third grade, and the race to where? There's a great movie about the race to nowhere. What are we doing to our kids? And this is because we're overwhelmed as parents. And on top of that, many of them are 2 working parents, full-time. How do you have time to think? How do you have time to handle all of these things? I was fortunate. I grew up in Israel. I grew up in the Bnei Akiva youth movement. Grew up with, as I said, 54 first cousin, grandparents in the neighborhood. I had a very strong foundation. And it was obvious for me that I want to teach my kids Hebrew. So I asked everyone for present to bring books and bring DVDs and cassette. At that time it was cassette. And I was rooted in the Jewish holidays, so we celebrate every holiday with the non-Jew community in the university housing. We celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut with our Iranian friends and friends from Peru and friends from Mexico and from all over the world, because I also wanted my kids to be global. And for every birthday, I think we send in like 10 different languages, depends on the friends that we had at home, in Japanese, in Taiwanese, whatever it was. It was fabulous. I called it University of Life, one of the best experiences in my life, truly. And at the same time, I went to the public library and I got books in English because I wanted to learn nursery rhyme. I never studied them when I was in Israel, in middle school and high school, learning English. And I went to a church the first time to celebrate Thanksgiving with a friend from Malaysia, because I wanted to learn about these holidays. I didn't want to make them mine, but I wanted to be immersed in the culture, the place, the new home that we had. And this was for 4 years. I thought we were coming for 4 years and going back to Israel. And after that, my husband got a position at MIT, and we moved to Massachusetts, and this is 17 years after. And this was actually a good point for me because I knew that this is for a long term. Like many Israelis, I wasn't sure that I'm not going to go back, but I knew that this is going to be our new home right now. And I realized that I can't do it on my own. It's too tiring. How can you do it on your own, be in charge of the language and the culture and being in charge and building the sukkah and cooking the food and teaching the songs and doing all of these things? When in Israel, my father and my brother used to do this, my mother used to do this, the grandmother how can one person do it all? I couldn't, or even two people. And then I joined a temple. Very unlike many Israelis. I joined a conservative synagogue. I'm still a member there for 17 years, one of the only or rare Israelis that are part of a temple. Because I said, I need somebody to help me raise children with Jewish heritage and Jewish identity in the United States. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it with my neighbors mowing their lawn on Yom Kippur. I don't know how to do it when I go to the supermarket and for every holiday they sell Amantashen and Hanukkah Gelt and all of the other stuff, because every holiday seemed the same. So I joined the temple, and I sent my kids to Hebrew school. I sent my kids later on to Prosdor. I took them twice a year to Israel. I was very fortunate. I spoke to them in Hebrew. And the love of Israel, the connection to Israel, very, very strong. And today they are 20 and 22, so I can look back and say, did I do well or not? Actually, next week, my younger daughter is going to go to Israel on her own because she feels fine. It's her home, and she can go back and forth. So for me to get to the point that they can travel on their own and go there because they want to go, this is a great success. They speak fluently Hebrew. My older one on campus, when she was a student, she was very active at Hillel, at the Student Alliance for Israel, SAFI. They did amazing work with BDS and other things and all of the Jewish life. And I actually had the opportunity to work with the staff there and work with students. So I'm also very involved in where they are getting to. So in some way, I am coming, and this session is about power of working with families of young children. But I'm not coming as disconnected from the entire journey of where we want to go. In some way, because I see where my kids are and where these college students are, I'm advocating more and more and more for early education and for early engagement of families of young children. Because when I meet students in college, and in some colleges, they try to convince them to go on birthright. They try to convince them. It's a free trip, and many students don't take advantage of it because they don't have any connection to Israel. And when we're talking why people don't take Hebrew earlier on the different session, because they never study Hebrew. And we're looking back, and this is where I'm coming from my work at Hebrew College. When I see sometimes who are the teachers that engaging these children, they're not coming from authentic place to teach the kids the love of Israel, the love of Judaism. I took 2 years ago a group of science professionals and educators to Israel. Half of them weren't Jewish, because some of them are serving our families. And I said, whoever is working with our families, we need to train them. And I said, if you're teaching in Israel, at least I want you to come from authentic way. And I'm not converting them. Travel to Israel, just understand what Israel is about. We also celebrate an Orthodox Shabbat. People at the college, because said to me, why Orthodox Shabbat? I said, because I want them to understand the gift of Judaism to the world. It's something universal. It's not just about being a Jewish, and it's not about what you can do or you can't. And on Friday night, I prepared them ahead of time. We did some text study before we went, and I told them to bring what kind of clothing to bring. At 2 o'clock, we came to the Moshav. They all went take a shower. They came at around 4:30. It was winter. The non-Jews included. They're all looking at one another, even the way everybody dressed, and they said, like, wow, something is happening. They can sense it. And then we light the candles, and everyone wanted, including this couple of guys that I had from the Science Museum and other places, and they wanted to light the candles. And we spoke about the light that we are bringing into our life, into our home, especially in this digital world that we never put the phone aside, we check our email 24/7, we're never completely engaged with our families. So these are a couple of the things that I've been trying to do. How can we create this spark with our educators? And when I say educators, not just working with the preschool, even if they're running a PJ library or story time or any programming for families, how can we have enough of these people coming from authentic way to connect our families? And how can we as a community ensure that, like when I was in the delivery room and my family was sitting outside, that the Jewish community is the family sitting outside the living room and continuing with the families. From the beginning, nourishing them from the beginning. Because you can't come and say, I want to teach you about Israel when you're in high school because Israel is important. Then they come and say, if you tell me it's important, there's something, I'm asking a question. If you want to take me on birthright, it means that there's agenda, something that you want to sell me. But when you come to preschoolers or young families, and you come and bring Hebrew and said, it's good for the development of the brain of your child. And we have many non-Jewish families that are interested in that because it's a language. And if I said to them, we're teaching about Israel, yes, it's a connection to the Jewish people, but at the same time, we're living in a global world. So if your kids learn about America, Israel, there are other countries, and then you travel to another one, we're creating these like global kids. So in a Jewish preschool, we're choosing Israel. And they're feeling very, very connected to that. So the panel that we created today and some of my experience that I'm sharing is why we really need to look at this age group. Unfortunately, this room is not very full, and it's not surprising in some ways, because not enough people are paying attention to this age group. We held a national symposium a few months ago. We called it From Building Blocks to Building Communities, because we always look at, they're little kids, they're just playing with blocks. You know, they can't really do something. They can't really do much. You know, why invest energy in that? So about a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, I created a forum. It's called the JIF, Jewish Early Engagement Forum, trying to create a national movement, trying to do lots of advocacy, and trying to convince more and more people that this is very important time in the life of a child and a time of the families. And I hope that in the very near future, we can truly make a transformation that the Jewish community will pay attention. And then we can make sure that we have a strong foundation from the beginning in a very strong ways. So I invited here to serve with us a panelist that in some way we are going to create a narrative or a story. I'm not going to share their full bio. I'm just going to give their title and maybe few words because you have it on their website. We're going to start with Neta. Neta is the owner of psychotherapy and mindfulness private practice, and she's the IAC Florida Regional Council member. Neta is working mostly with adolescents and adults and facing life changes. And I know, Neta, that you're also leading workshops on topics such as women immigration, mindfulness, and identity about Israelis and Jews, and also the sense of belonging of the second generation Israelis and American. You're working with them when they're a bit older. We're talking about a younger age. From your perspective, from your knowledge, if you had to talk to parents in the beginning of the journey, what are some of the things that we would like to tell them? And also, if you want to talk to the Jewish community and tell them where to start and what to do and why. So please share with us.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Okay. What I would like to speak is about two very crucial concepts in the development of children, and this is identity and belonging. When you think about kids, you think about something very nice, laughing, crying, but remember, identity is something that since we born, just by the idea that we are a male or a female, it's make a difference in our life. So identity is, as we say, it's a picture. It's a picture about ourselves, who we are, that based on memories, event, experience, everything that we are involved in our life since we are since actually the first day that we born. Just by the idea, and Bowlby spoke about it, he was one of the psychologists that spoke about attachment theory, about the importance of just holding the baby. Those are all memories that will create our identity. So identity is something that since we born, create, and of course it's not fixed, it can be changed, and it can be changed through our life. So this is very, very important to understand when we speak about young families. The other concept is about belonging, and we know that as a human being, part of the idea is that we have, and they show it's even biological, the tendency to try to belong to someone. So it can be family, it can be a community, it can be somebody, it can be even a teacher. You know, in high school, sometimes that we speak about kids in high risk, and we saw those kids when they're older, what helped them to survive, and sometimes it's a significant adult that, you know, they met through their life. So belonging is something very, very important in the development. So belonging to family, belonging to somebody, belonging to a community. So those, when we speak about identity, part of the Jewish identity is the idea of belonging and the idea of building identity. So when we speak about identity, and sometimes, especially Israeli American, and let me, by my accent, you can figure out that I was not born here. I will tell you a little bit around myself after. But when we speak about identity, usually, and I see it in the Jewish community as well, people think about Jewish identity when their kids are around 11 years old, when it's the almost bat mitzvah, bar mitzvah. So then they start to think about identity, and wow, I have to join the synagogue. I have to find something to teach my kids about the Jewish identity because the bat mitzvah and bar mitzvah will be very soon. And I'm speaking about some of my friends that they said it's so expensive, and this is the truth, it's very, very expensive. So they said, you know what, it's only for 1-2 years, and then after the bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah, they can drop, because now they know what being Jewish is. So Jewish and Jewish identity, it's something that if we will not start in the beginning, we're not sure that it will hold for many years. So this is one issue that I would like to raise. The other issue that I see with young families is, as Rachel said in the beginning, you know, you're married or you live with somebody, you have a double career, especially as a woman. You need to take care of the kids, small kids. There are financial issues. So many components that going into the family. So sometimes the Jewish identity, this is not something that, you know, at the top of your things because you want to survive. I remember myself with 3 small kids. I just want to finish the day, survive, and go to bed and wake up in the morning. So what are you telling me about Jewish identity? This is not something that right now I'm thinking about because my kids are very young, so why should I think about it? But you should. But you should. The third issue that I would like to raise is the Pew survey. I don't know how many of you are familiar with. Are you? Anyone heard about? Maybe I'm not pronouncing it good.
No, you
The
pronounce
Pew
it
report,
correct.
yeah.
Pew.
Pew.
P-
P-E-W.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
2.5 years.
In 2013, it's the Research Institute. What's the name of the institute in Washington, D.C.?
Research.
It's it's called Pure. Actually, it's a survey.
Yeah.
It's a survey. It's not a research, and it's a survey that between, you know, they check many ethnic groups, and between the ethnic group they check the Jewish group. And what they did, which was very interesting, they tried to compare between Jews in Israel compared to Jews in the States. And what they see, and this is like one of the shocking finding that I saw, is that those aged between 20 to 30, those millennium kids, are less connected to Israel, and they're much less connected to their Jewish identity. And this is something very, very important that you need to think about, as well as that if you try to combine the numbers, you can see that almost 72% involve in intermarriage. 72%. So more Jews married to non-Jews than Jews married between themselves. I'm just bringing you the numbers so you will understand the difference. And connected to Israel, for me, it's not just connected to Israel. Connected to Israel is also connected to the Jewish identity. Okay, if we take into consideration that Israel is part of the Jewish identity. And this is my personal view. So this is the point that I would like to raise. And I also, Rachel, do I have time?
A minute.
Okay.
We want to make sure that
Family. And I would like to introduce you to Rabbi Kornfeld. Rabbi Yehuda Kornfeld and I are working in the last year together, trying to figure out how can we involve more young families in the idea of being involved in the Jewish identity and taking care and think about Jewish identity as part of their Jewish day life. Because, as we know, Jewish education costs a lot of money, so we have many families that are not involved in Jewish education. Besides the fact that not always they do have Jewish schools nearby. Not all of them, and now I'm speaking about the Israeli American, most of them are not members of any of the synagogues. They might go to Chabad because Chabad seems like more close, but most of them are not involved in the Jewish life. And if they send their kids to any of the JCC or any of the daycare, it's more until they're in kindergarten. So when they're in kindergarten, usually they send in their kids to public school. So Rabbi Kornfeld and I thought we have to do something. So we started with the Israeli American family, and if you can speak like a couple of minutes and
Maybe
tell the
later,
idea?
later on, Neta.
Huh?
We want to make
Later
sure
on?
everybody has the time, yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank Thank you very much. When we're talking about identity, it's not just for the sake of having identity. It's like we're asking, like, why? What is it in the Jewish life that we really want to give to our children? And talking about, is it the piece about Israel? Why Israel? So all of these questions that we need to ask ourselves, but it's making the fuller picture. And I want to now move to Arnee, because Arnee, she shared with me yesterday that since third grade, she was fascinated with Hebrew. And she wasn't just fascinated with Hebrew, she went to fund a day school to make sure that Hebrew will be part of that. And later on, she co-founded the Hebrew at the Center, where she is the president and the CEO. Arnee, you really committed to Hebrew. And nationally, everywhere you go, you're trying to push Hebrew, Hebrew, Hebrew. So why? Why? And the second thing, so why Hebrew? And the second thing, why, or if you think that as early we start, it's going to be better for where you see the landscape right now.
So thank you. So I'm an American who aspires to become fluent and proficient in Hebrew. But it's interesting, Neta, because when Rachel asked me to speak on the topic of Hebrew language, which is my passion, I referred to the research. My background is in developmental psycholinguistics, and I also, during my career, ran an English immersion early childhood program for 5 lab schools. So I've been working with language, whether it was Hebrew or other languages, for most of my career. And when I went to really gather information for this panel, the main thing that came up for me was identity and belonging. So we have the same theme. When in the research around language, and especially I was looking into talking about the dual language home, because we have, most of the audience here is Israeli American, and either it's both parents could be from Israel or one parent from Israel and living in the American society. And so I was looking at it from the point of view of the audience, although much of what I'm going to talk about impacts American parents who are thinking about identity from an early age. And identity and belonging is really about children developing a positive sense of who they are and feeling that they are valued and respected as part of a family and a community. And this really contributes to self-esteem and other factors in their development and their growth. When you look at the whole question of home language, culture, and identity together, the research shows that preserving children's home language supports their lasting connection with their families and culture and contributes to their healthy sense of identity. So one of the things that you were already alluded to and shared in your own, think about who you are, who is your authentic self. So if you grew up in Israel, your native language was Hebrew, and you grew up in Israeli traditions, things from your home, and then you try to be American and your home is an English-speaking home, you're actually disconnecting from your authentic self, and children from a very young age actually know that. They pick those things up. And then when you think about going back, connecting to the rest of your family, the children who grow up here and don't grow up with Hebrew and don't grow up with familiar traditions, you can go home and visit, but they don't have the same connection. They don't have the way of relating to their grandparents, to their cousins, to the experience. So it's really a gift to the children living in America, they're going to pick up English. They're going to pick up American culture, all of that. Their identity is going to be different than yours was. But what you have as a gift for them is to give them your authentic identity and to share that, your language and your culture. And there's an institute called the Early Childhood Language Development Institute that was established in 2003, and to specifically look at dual language learners and their home and their environment. The vision of that institute was based on the premise that a child's home language and culture is very closely tied to her identity, his or her identity and self-esteem, which are critical elements that ultimately influence children's learning experiences in school and throughout life. And so this has been demonstrated in research consistently that the home language contributes to learning a second language more successfully. So part of the fear of, oh, I'm living in America, we have to speak English at home. It's a false fear, because in fact, it really grounds them in a home language and really helps them in their learning. Some of the things I wanted to really share is that there's a lot of impact on learning, and when you have more than one language, it's a real gift. It's actually a gift to your children. The research shows that there's a reduction in dementia in elderly when there's higher SAT scores. In certain subjects like math, the kids do better when they have more than one language. We know that from an early age that if you begin with more than one language, your cognitive development is accelerated, and what we call is metalinguistic. You're understanding that language is one lens that carves up the world, but there's difference between language and reality, and you develop more empathy and understanding of other cultures and an ability to relate to people and to be perceptive about other cultures. So there are actually multiple gifts you're giving your child, besides the fact that you're grounding them in an identity and a culture which, as all of us here are particularly important to us about Jewish identity. And it's interesting because we've had in the panels throughout the conference this whole question of, there's the connection to Israel and the state of Israel, but there's the connection to Am Yisrael. Hebrew is a language that spans the years and spans the communities, and is a connecting element of connecting us to Am Yisrael. I can talk more about this, but I think
we're going to have a chance. We're going to have a chance later on. Yes.
So, you may know more about this than I do. 0 to 2 is one window, and there's a whole thing about laying down neural networks, but it's by no means a closed door. 0 to 7, 8 is considered early childhood. Technically, 0 to 8 is the time of early childhood, and during that time, there's development of language skills, and it's a pre-literacy time, although kids learn to read, et cetera, at different stages. So during that time, kids can really acquire language. The earlier, the better, which is why if in your home, if you actually speak another language as your native language, speaking that language to the children, no matter how they respond to you, is really setting them up early for that all the benefits. You can learn a language as an adult. It has the impact on their who-ness, on somebody's who-ness, and how much that is part of their identity dissipates in terms of the strength of the impact the older they get. But
Just quick question,
Yeah.
quick comments. remember, language is also culture. It's not just the language per se, that they speak Spanish or they speak English or they speak Hebrew. It's also culture, it's also connection to the family in Israel, okay? The grandparents, the uncle, the aunts. So language is about culture and language is about Jewish identity. What I can share with you from my own experience, my little one, she is 13 years old. She speaks 3 languages. Because I live in Florida, so Spanish is one of the language.
Yeah.
So, and I was really worried when she was, I think, in 2nd grade. I tested her for the gifted program, and the psychologist that tested her told me, listen, her knowledge in English is about the average plus, but her IQ is much higher. So what do you think? Because she was in a bilingual program. So at home we speak only Hebrew, and in school she spoke half of the day and learned half of the day in English and half of the day in Spanish. And I was really debating because, you know, okay, so let me tell you at the end, what's happened is that I decided to continue, and now she is 13 years old, and I can tell you she's given presentation, okay? Presentation in Spanish. She is fluently excellent in English as well as in Hebrew. So even 3 languages, they can catch up. It takes time, and you don't need to be afraid because by time, they catch up the language to the higher level.
Thank you. I also invited Jeanne Lovy to join us to this panel. I know Jeanne very well from Boston, so I'm very thankful that you joined me here today. Jeanne is the vice president of the JCCs of Greater Boston, but nationally she also served on the Continental Task Force, which developed Sheva. This is the JCCs of North America Early Learning Framework, and she's currently on the faculty that mentor and teach Sheva. And how many of you heard about Sheva? Raise your hand. Good, so you're going to learn. Good. So Jeanne, I actually printed from their website of Sheva a little information about it, which is interesting. And it's stated that the early childhood education has been a centerpiece of JCCs almost a century. But it was mostly the early childhood centers or preschool, what we call them. There is a shift in the past couple of years also with thinking and also the approach that is very well rooted in latest research of child development, which led to this new program. And I asked Jeanne if she can share with us a little bit what this program is about and what is it based off, to kind of create a framework for us.
And I almost very aware that we're at the end of the time.
No, we have 15 more minutes.
Oh, good. Okay,
We're
so
good.
I'll be brief. I didn't
We're
know if we
good.
were scheduled to 5:30 or 5:45.
5:45.
Okay,
yes.
so it's such an honor to be here. Thank you so much, and so amazing to learn from my colleagues on the panel. So I'm going to shift the focus a little bit from the theory and the ideas about education and attachment and cultural transmission that Arnee and Neta have been teaching us about to what that looks like in an organization. And so the JCC, as some of you know, the JCC movement was essentially founded really to assimilate people coming in from other countries and learning Jewish life, and to be a place where people could find themselves Jewishly over the last few decades. So the JCC has that tradition of being a place where, with a pluralistic approach, a place to help people approach and understand Jewish life and their own identity. So in recent years, like everyone, like every Jewish organization, whether it's about camping or day school or synagogue life or Hebrew, we've been assessing and understanding the changes that are happening with families. And my entire career has been devoted to 2 things, I would say. One is what creates change. I started as an early childhood educator and teacher, coach, and trainer, and I was really interested in the idea of why we say some teachers were trainable and others weren't, right? When you say, oh, that person gets it, and that person doesn't get it, or that person's on the train and that person's not on the train, that used to really bother me. What were the actions and activities we could take to move someone along from an area of training or learning to the next area. And I think that's what we're doing now at the JCC around what we can do to support and understand where families are and where they are trying to go and how we can support and be along with them at that time. The second thing that's very much animated my work and my career is the power of a transformational moment or conversation. And if we had a different panel, I could tell you some examples of things that completely changed for me because of one moment or one conversation. And I think that can also be true for families and young children. But as we start to think about in other panels today, people have talked about influencers or a big moment or a big experience. And I think that we have an incredible power in all of our programming, whether it's at a JCC or somewhere else, to create those moments that create change even more than incrementally over time. So both of those ideas about incremental change as well as big moment change are personally very animating to me, and I think embedded in some of the program responses we can have to these ideas about identity and culture that are changing. So the Sheva is an early childhood framework. It's for JCC early childhood centers. It was created a few years ago by Mark Horowitz, who's sort of the visionary leader at the head of the JCC movement having to do with early childhood and family engagement. The idea of Sheva was there were 7 core principles. One of them was children are constructive as learners. One of them was about families as engaged partners. I'm not going to go into it now. It's not relevant, but I'm happy to talk about it afterwards with anybody. But the idea that started to evolve through going to JCCs and talking to them about Sheva was that, sort of like a light bulb moment, that the idea of having common principles and animating ideas that had to do with early childhood could apply to everything the JCC does and the JCC organization. And it gets to that question of what business are we in? And somebody might say you're in the business of preschool, or you're in the business of camping, or you're in the business of fitness. But of course, at the JCC movement level and at the local JCC level where I work, we would say, my CEO, Mark Sokol, another visionary leader, would say, we're in the business of helping families construct their Jewish identity. We're in the construction business. So if the JCC is in the construction business, what does that mean for how we behave every day and what we do? And that is where Sheva, which is a framework around some common principles, and what's happening in the world of Jewish engagement, including with Israeli families and Israeli American families, kind of mesh. So there's this idea called the Sheva Center, which is really just being populated by some work that some JCCs are doing and we're doing in Boston. We've created this concept called the Center for Families. And what the Center for Families is trying to say is, how do we move beyond the programs that we're doing every day to include the lens of the sort of weave in the ideas and experiences as well. So we can conduct a preschool, and I'm from the my early childhood is my passion. So I don't mean to sound dismissive, but I am going to dismiss it right now and say that's one thing we do. PJ Library, also I'm completely a passionate supporter of PJ Library in Boston. PJ Library has completely transformed the imprint of Jewish life in this important age group 0 to 2 that Arnee was teaching us about. PJ Library is the #1 way in Boston we are finding new families that want to enter Jewish life, and I personally think PJ Library is profoundly powerful tool for creating Jewish identity, because families in their own home are creating it by reading a story with their child, which is one of the most intimate parent-child moments. And no Jewish organization is in the room telling people how they should be doing that. They can read the book, they cannot read the book, they can just talk about it with the adults. They can read it 50 times, they can read it 1 time. They can change the words as they're reading. PJ Library is remarkable and worth its own session. I've found it to be personally motivating and also very important to Jewish transmission in Boston. So we have that, we have holiday programs. In Boston, we have a gazillion programs. But the idea to me is, what's the connective tissue there? What are the ideas and experiences that are important? And I want to take a minute to talk about some of those. The first thing I would say is just a scope shift. And again, I care so much about early childhood. I'm happy to talk about early childhood with anybody that wants to. But in Boston, for example, we have 4 preschools. We have 380 children approximately in preschool. We have 110 preschool teachers. That's a lot. That's a big preschool operation in one community. But last year in Boston alone, we engaged 14,000 individuals in programming for people with children 0 to 8. 14,000 people, including PJ Library, one at a big event at Children's Museum that 1,000 people came to, Shabbat dinners, mommy and me classes, baby swim, yoga, all kinds of tikkun olam, an overnight Shabbat hike, and you name it. We had almost 200 different individual activities. We engaged 14,000 people. So me as an administrator, as an executive at a Jewish organization, do I want to talk about the 385 or do I want to talk about the 14,000? I want to talk about both, but I really want to talk about the 14,000. And on the national level, when you think about 20,000 kids in JCC preschools, you have to extrapolate. I don't have the number, but I'm thinking it's 400,000 or 500,000 individuals that are getting engaged at JCCs with children between 0 and 8. It's bigger than just early childhood. The power that the JCC movement and also other Jewish organizations, I just happen to be talking JCC today, have to interact with and dialogue with families, including, of course, Israeli families who are here for a short time or the growing group of Israeli families who are here for a long time. And I think it's just a really important next step for our field or if we're creating a field, to think about the big number as well as the little number. The intimacy of a book, sitting in bed with your child at night, the intimacy and privilege of being with a preschool child every day for 365 days a year, all year, and the broadness and scope of touching and interacting with hundreds of thousands of families over time. So when we start to talk about how we're going to build a Jewish future, because remember, that was our goal. Our goal is not to build another preschool or run a great program. We know how to do that, and I'm also happy to talk about all that. The goal is to construct Jewish identity or help families do that, to build and ensure a Jewish future. And to me, those families include Israeli families, those families include the 70-something% of families that have a non-Jewish member living in them, and I think that number is going to increase. It includes a huge, very, very broad range, that's a big part of the JCC, of Jewish life in America. And I think we're really at an exciting time to start to think together about what some of those commonalities are that we might want to build together across organizations and across constituencies.
Thank you, Jeanne.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure. Yeah,
I know.
thank you.
So that's what I wanted to talk about, the Center for Families and Sheva, but I just want to say one thing, because I'm here to represent JCC Association. If you want to talk about Sheva, please find me afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. This is very helpful. I want now to introduce Jeremy Fingerman. He's the CEO of the Foundation for Jewish Camp. And he joined the foundation in 2010. And he has very rich experience in the Jewish world, including spending many lovely summers at Camp Ramah in Wisconsin. And the reason I invited Jeremy to sit here on the panel is not because the new initiative to work with day camp right now, and it's not about some of their work with younger children and families, rather talking on the big picture or the national picture, and to learn from your wisdom and the wisdom of your organization. As we heard from Neta, identity, it's being formed and built from birth, even before, and the work with the family is essential. As we heard from Arnee, so passionate about Hebrew, that it's very important to start early. As we understand from Jeanne, JCC really understand it, that we are here in the business of working with families and identities. It's not about number. It's not about enrollment in a synagogue. It's what are we trying to do? Are we trying to create a vibrant Jewish community? So one of the things that I've been struggling, and I've been directing the Early Childhood Institute for over 10 years, and for about 7-8 years started to do advocacy that this age group is so crucial. And 2.5 years ago, tried to start a movement nationally to bring this to the center and ask many of our funders, foundation, denomination, JCCs, anyone that is involved in that business or business of identity in Jewish families and vibrant community, what can we do for this specific group that right now I would say underserved, overlooked by our community? What can we learn from a Jewish entity and the power of it? And if we can have something like that, or what we need to do to get there.
Thank you. First, kol hakavod to all of you. I have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old. I wish this session was 15 years ago, so I would have all the lessons that you've shared. Very, very moving. And truly moving even my own thinking of how important this is. And so I hope the message does go forward. I think you really asked, what can we learn as a Jewish community, and how can we build not just a consensus, but a real galvanizing force around addressing the importance of families with young kids. So I am a CEO of an organization that's been around for 18 years, and everybody says, wow, use FJC as your example. And Arnee can speak to this or confirm this, the early years of FJC, don't look at FJC today, go back 18 years ago. Very challenging times, very lonely times. What was it? You had entrepreneurial philanthropists who helped to get the thing started. We had prominent communal lay leaders who started joining, and they invested in professional leaders within the foundation, professional leaders within the various institutions. And I think really what they did was a calculated approach to create early wins, to broadcast those wins, to share those wins with the community, and to begin to engage others in the community. I'm a big fan of the Federation Network in the sense that what our foundation did was partner with federations across North America. Camping is their agenda, it's not our agenda. We've made it their agenda. We can almost step up because they're investing their dollars in it, because we provided knowledge, data. We were sort of a galvanizing force and an advocate, but they took it on. And once the federations and the local communities took it on, that was the big win for our field. So as these brains we think about what we've heard today, how can we get those early wins? How can we engage our partners beyond this room? The federations, the JCCs and synagogues and schools who are already doing it. How do we get passionate lay leaders and professionals working together? So 2 more thoughts. I'll say the first around advocacy is articles, thought leadership, data. It's almost, I see we're filming, how do we capture some of these quotes and get it written up and shared? Because the story needs to go out from this conference and beyond. And it starts with thought leadership that then changes conversations within the funder world, within the federation world, within sort of the lay leadership world. And I think a combined combined effort, I won't call it an organization, a combined coalition, a combined effort, a forum, can give efficiencies and results. And ultimately, as investors, philanthropists, we all want results. We want to invest in results. And so I think you want to find ways where you can deliver results and create efficiencies for all the organizations working in that world. I think I'm convinced, based on sort of what I've heard again today, of the importance of families with young kids, the importance of starting early, the connections they make, everything we've heard. And now it's our combined responsibility to tell this story out to others and begin one by one community. Let's start with Los Angeles. How do we get on the agenda of the Los Angeles community into conversations, invite national organizations to come to be a part of that conversation, and you'll start to see a sea change in terms of how people view this particular segment, an important segment of our Jewish community. Right? Thank you, and wish all of us much success in addressing this.
Yes, please.
My kids participate in Jewish sleepaway camps in the summer. They're a little bit older, the 3 older kids, but the little younger kids, I was wondering about day Jewish camps. Can we do something about this? At least in LA, we do not have day Jewish camps.
Terrible, yes.
And I cannot wait them to be a little older to send them to the sleepaway camps. My kids go to Ramah, Lunim, and come to Anga.
The message of today is we've got to start early.
Yeah.
And our foundation, and Arnee was a part of those deliberations over quite a number of years. We voted as a board strategically to begin working with day camps, to begin interacting with families with young kids, realizing that we're on a journey, we're all on this journey together, the family interaction. And I do think this sense of belonging, you may not belong as much, the community may not belong as much now or want to pay membership to a school or a synagogue or a JCC in some areas. What they do, they want to though belong to something. They want to belong to either a brand or an inspiring rabbi or leader or something. If we can create a sense of belonging, and earlier, so in my world, I would say from day camps and those brand connections, I want to feel that people have a real sense of belonging to the Jewish community, and I think that's all of our obligations to do so.
Yes. I know that our time is almost done, and I want to make sure that we have time. I shared with some of the panelists that this summer I actually did a pilot program in a small community in Manchester, Vermont, a summer camp for kids from 4-year-olds to 10. I got a phone call from a parent, and she said, I want something for my kids. I can't wait until I send them to overnight camp. Can you find somebody to do it? And I said, you know what, I'll come for this one because I want to see it as a pilot, something that we can later on duplicate around the country. The camp was for 5 days, from 9 to 3 every day. From 4 to 10-year-olds. I told them that I want the topic to be Israel and Hebrew, and I want to include lots of Hebrew. We did it through games and music. The interesting things that we had, one kid the first day said to the parents in the afternoon, when can we go to Israel? Another girl came to the parents and said, I want to study Hebrew. Another boy came to me and said to me, is this really Jewish? It's fun. So they never had a fun opportunity. I had some kids that came with the grandparents because when it's interfaith families, sometimes the parents don't feel comfortable to kind of channel to one religion, and they leave it to the grandparents. So it was fascinating, and definitely I think it's a model that we need to look into and bring to many communities. I know that our time is
No, I want to ask a
up,
question.
but if anyone, we're okay with, are we okay with staying a few more minutes?
We're
Yeah,
okay
We're
staying
fine
a
to
few
You wanna ask a
minutes.
question?
Five
It's
more
fine if
minutes,
you need
okay.
to go.
Thank you.
So I guess I have a question that is directed more into the research and scientific part of it. I'm Israeli, but when a couple is one Israeli and one is American, and the Hebrew, the culture, the Israeli culture, I'm not so much talking about the Jewish part, but the Israeli culture tends to be a very small part of the family. So basically, if the husband or the partner is not Israeli as well, you lose part of that culture. And if you can't really afford those schools, which I think, not everybody can, and you can't really go into all these programs, and also these programs usually emphasize Judaism over Israeli aspects or values. And through this conference, everybody's been saying Israeli Jewish values are the same as American values. It is, but the culture is very, very different. How do you, manage that minority, or how would you go about it? How would you go about managing the minority, the cultural minority in the family cell when the main influencers are actually American and only one is Israeli?
First, I don't think that you're a minority. I think that many, many Israelis is married. Are you? Married to non? I said not to non-Israeli. Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure that you're a minority. I see so many. First, let me change the terminology. You're not losing, you're gaining, okay? I think that if we look differently about the richness that your kids, do you have kids? No. I think that the richness that your kids will have, it's amazing because you can bring the language. And I see many families, by the way, that one of the parents speaks in Hebrew, one of the other parent speaks in English, and that's fine. As long as both of you, and remember, it's all about the connection in the family and the relationship in the family, as long as you both having the same idea, what you would like to have in your family, I don't think it's a problem. Okay? I don't think it's a problem because you can bring the richness of the language, the culture, and your husband can bring the American, because my husband is Israeli, and you can ask my daughter, we face with our kids many issues, like please speak English at home when we have friends, or please mommy, try to do the American food. So the idea that we both Israelis are not usually, the advantage. So the idea that you both can share, I think it's great. So this is my.
Let's allow. Yeah. Let's allow two more questions and then closing. I'll have a chance for everyone.
We actually have maybe just time for one more. So. It's not a question. I'm so passionate about this panel that I feel that we need to make a new thing, I don't know how to call it, about the second generation of kids here. It's so many parents that are asking all the time, what can I do? I don't know what to do, how I can manage the thing that I'm from Israel, my husband is American, or both are Israeli. I have so many ideas. And I really think that we need to help like her. She needs help just with guidance. It's not much. It's about a book, like a book at the end of the night, are talking about a little Hebrew at home or a little English. And also for me, because I'm from the entertainment, and also I have my own kindergarten in Spanish, that is something. But I think that is so important, the entertainment thing, and the thing is the fun is kif kuf kef. It's about my thing that it's so fun learn Hebrew and how we learn Hebrew. Sometimes at school, it's a little, my word right now, it's like depressing, but it's not that what I want to say. It's like, it's not in a fun way. We just need to connect all together in the same level and have fun with all these problem that we call a problem, but it's like to change the focus and build a challenge and build a new project.
Thank you. I'm going to be here if anyone wants to ask me a question after that, but I want us to conclude because there are receptions and other programming. Does anyone want to say anything?
We can't squeeze in one last.
Yeah, you can. I apologize. I have to leave because I have another thing.
So you can go. You can go.
But I want to stay.
Okay.
I'm a young family also.
Okay.
Okay.
Because I know that Jeremy needs to leave also.
Yeah. Okay. Can
Yeah.
he ask
Yes,
his last
sure.
question? Careful, it's a microphone.
It feels like the boxed wine version of a microphone. Can you hear me? I can shout. It's an oddball question, but I was once upon a time a teacher of EFL, English, in China. So in the limited training I had, they talked about the incremental approach to language learning, and if you try to stretch someone too far from where they are, they're not going to pick up anything from it. So since you mentioned language is identity, language is culture, and then especially I'm curious about the JCC, but more broadly speaking, in helping families build their Jewish identity, do you have an analogous incrementalism kind of approach? And you can philosophize about, well, in language there's like an in target and there's many steps that are expected, whereas maybe people want to stop early after 2 steps of building their Jewish identity.
I would just say briefly, again, for all Jewish organizations, even though I was speaking with the JCC lens, I think this is exactly what has to happen next, is create an understanding about what experiences matter most, what experiences are most likely to draw a line to later engagement and positive associations with being Jewish, and also sort of the understanding of variability, because there isn't just one positive outcome. So for one family, a positive outcome might be fluency in Hebrew. For another family, it might be a dual cultural identity. For another family, it might just be feeling good about being Jewish. Another family, it might be something that we can't even imagine. So I think that this idea of what cultural literacy is, or cultural understanding is really interesting for the 0 to 5 or 0 to 6 crowd right now. And before, it was just thought of as cute or fun or nice to have. And I think what we're seeing in Jewish communal life now is that it's necessary. Some early experiences lay down these patterns that are necessary towards later engagement. So I have some ideas about what are the most important, but I think the next step for all of us is to start to draw research and impact data from what we think to what we know, and that would help all Jewish organizations. Certainly in language acquisition, there is probably a more clear understanding of those experiences. But for the acquisition of positive Jewish identity, that's a really cool next step problem for all of us to start to identify and populate. And I think probably not just the panel, but everybody sitting here today has some assumptions and ideas about how we might start that. And so that's what's kind of exciting about what's going on next.
Thank you. I would like to conclude. We are going to celebrate Rosh Hashanah very soon. When you sit around the table and you see all of the apples and honey and pomegranate and other things, these are all like very early childhood oriented. How can we sense them and enjoy them and make them part of who we are? So to really think about this very important age group and all of these experiences that we are creating for our children, for our community, and hopefully to make it a stronger year. I'm coming from more Sephardic background, and we usually have a head of a fish. Even though I'm vegetarian, I usually take it out. So maybe we'll be like a head and not a tail, so we can lead, we can continue to bring sweetness and a strong year to all of us. So I wish you all Shana Tova.